one of Canada's most thoughtful environmentalists and one of the only ones with a PhD in the scientific field, one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, is our friend Patrick Moore. And it's a pleasure to have him back on the show from Vancouver. Welcome back, Dr. Moore.
Nice to be with you again, Ezra.
You know, I want to talk to you about the UN Climate Change Conference. There's always one going on in some exotic and far-flung location, Bali, Rio, Marrakesh. Now it's in Doha, in the country of Qatar, in the Middle East. There's not a lot of press about it, though, as there has been in the past. Why is that? Has the media fallen out of love with the story of global warming, or do people see that, I don't know, well, you explain it for me.
I think actually the general public has fallen out of love with the subject because they're aware of a number of factors. One is that the slight warming that occurred during the 80s and 90s, 1980s and 1990s, has stopped for the past 15 years. There's been no net warming, and 2012 appears that it will be even cooler than 2011, which was cooler than 2010. So there is no trend going on right now. In addition, the IPCC, despite all this rhetoric about extreme weather events, made it very clear in their report of March this year that there is to date no evidence whatsoever of any kind of footprint of climate change on extreme weather events. And they said whether it's human-caused or not, there is no evidence of increases in extreme weather events. And so they have to invent things like Superstorm Sandy, a whole new word, when it was just a tropical storm. It wasn't even a hurricane. And they said it was because of human emissions that it was so strong. It wasn't so strong. As a matter of fact, a new record has been set. It's been 7 years since a Category 3 hurricane or larger struck the continental United States. This is for the first time since the Civil War that there's been a 7-year period with this kind of lull in hurricane activity. And hurricane activity globally is now less than half of what it was just 10 years ago.
That's amazing. You don't hear that a lot. Let me quote to you from the woman who's chairing this conference in Doha, Qatar. She says this with some lament, but I see some hope in it. This is Christiana Figueres, who says she doesn't see, and I'm just going to quote here, much public interest support for governments to take on more ambitious and more courageous decisions. So Christiana Figueres, who's the chief global bureaucrat for climate change, says, yeah, governments really aren't there because public doesn't want it. Let me ask you, does this provide an opportunity for real science-based environmentalists who actually have plans to help problems that we can do some help for, to fill the void? I mean, my point is, even if we all follow the Kyoto Protocol, it actually wouldn't change the world's temperature. It's hubris to think we could. Whereas there are some real pollution problems, air quality problems, water quality problems, that if we spent just a fraction of the money on it, we could actually solve them. Do you think real environmentalists can make a comeback now, Doctor?
I sure hope so, Ezra, because, you know, one of the biggest mistakes that was made was when the Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. declared that carbon dioxide was a toxic pollutant, when in fact it is the basis of all life on Earth. We are all carbon-based life forms. It's the most important element for life on Earth, and carbon dioxide in the air is the most important nutrient for all plants on Earth, which are the basis for basically all of life on Earth. So surely you should have the other side of it being shown to young people today, instead of making them think that carbon is a poison. Carbon is not a poison. It is the most essential nutrient there is in the world. And yes, it's possible that an increase in CO2 in the global atmosphere will result in some warming. But CO2 is certainly not the only factor that causes climate change. What brought on the ice ages 2.5 million years ago, that we are still in fact, this is still a very cold world compared to what the world has been like for most of the history of modern life when it's been warmer. Canada's Arctic islands were forested not that many millions of years ago, and yet today we are going on about what a catastrophe it is that ice is melting somewhere. I cannot see the benefit of ice particularly. A few creatures have managed to adapt to it with great difficulty. But on the by and large of it, it's the tropics where most of the species of life on this Earth exist, and the subtropics. And the closer you get to the North and South poles, the less life there is, because ice is the enemy of life. So surely we should have an alternative perspective on this, and I'm sure glad Canada dropped out of this waste of time of flying around to 5-star tropical resorts on a regular basis to get nowhere at all, because there really isn't anywhere to go as far as I can see.
You know, that's a great point. Bjorn Lomborg, who wrote a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist, says this is about an opportunity cost. If we're having a fancy pants conference about climate change, that means we're not spending that money and time solving some other problem. And I can't help but think, Doctor, that if these fancy bureaucrats and diplomats and scientists gathered in Doha, Qatar, focused on one solvable problem, like, say, water quality in India or malaria in Africa, if $1 billion that they're probably blowing in Doha was spent on a solvable problem, one after another, we could actually fix a lot of the planet. Am I being hubristic now, or is that a more solution-oriented way to approach environmentalism?
You're bang on, and I'm very optimistic, because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is now taking the lead on professionalizing international assistance and aid programs, and instead of it being a goody two-shoes thing where these young kids driving around in brand new Toyota Land Cruisers in Africa, we're going to have some actual programs that are professionally organized to deliver modern agricultural techniques and modern energy systems to Africa and Asia and South America and other countries that need this kind of assistance. So you're bang on. Air pollution, water pollution, malaria, HIV/AIDS, nutrient deficiencies such as vitamin A, vitamin E, and iron deficiency in the rice-eating countries. These are important things, and healthcare and all those kind of issues. All this energy that's been wasted on climate change could have been put into doing something where you get much more bang for your buck. And with the climate thing, I think it's misguided anyways. I don't really think there is a catastrophe waiting for us. And you're right, we can't just turn a dial and legislate the weather. It's simply ridiculous to think we could.
Dr. Moore, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Ezra.
Bye-bye.